Hello, everyone. Hey, Timothy.
Hey, Bui.
I am sitting with literally one of the people I have been studying from a distance. Because as I have grown as an academic and an entrepreneur, you're one of the people that I think I've always been so intrigued about. I remember your voice so vividly on the Metro FM. Like, I think you were mostly on T-Buzz's show, right?
Yeah, I've been on a bunch of them. Fat Joe, Fresh, Lasagna. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember you from there. And today we're talking behavioral science and luxury consumption in Africa. And of course, my guest is Timothy Maurice Webster. You've built your brand. I had an impression that your surname was Maurice, but you've built your brand to always include the Maurice. Is that deliberate?
It is so deliberate. When I first came to South Africa, the head of brand South Africa fell in love with Maurice. And Maurice has this kind of French background and history. He says it's got a luxury feel to it. And so he says, use it as a signature. And I also, upon thinking about it, I was like, Webster is very almost like Western white. Maurice has more of an ambiguous global feel.
Yeah.
And so coming to the market, I just thought it's my full first name, first and middle name, Timothy Maurice. And it sounded better. So it was very much, I can't get away from my full published name. So my book's Timothy Maurice Webster. So in the more academic field, you kind of have to use that West. The media space, it just kind of
That is what has registered with me. So when I got your bio, and I was like, oh, Webster's the surname, not Timothy Maurice. So welcome to the podcast. We're now well into our season 2. And as we typically do, my name is Bui Mafuku, a seasoned entrepreneur, luxury consultant, as well as a speaker, really just setting out to chronicle the story of African luxury. It's simple what we do here. We're a luxury education platform, and on each episode, we draw context just from the richness and sort of the culture of the continent. And of course, I'm sitting with the boat leader. Of course, I'm sitting with a media mind, and so this conversation should be very stimulating for both you and me. Today, my guest is Timothy Maurice Webster, as we've just alluded to. Timothy is a human behavioralist, and we're going to get into all of it. A researcher, as well as that best-selling author of multiple books centered on views about human behavior and brand behavior. He was or is a personal leadership columnist.
Yeah. Still works.
Still, yeah. He is a personal leadership columnist for over a decade now, establishing himself as a credible media voice, and this is where my introduction and really just relationship from a distance started, and consultant offering advisory for professionals seeking to grow their leadership, influenced by understanding how to apply neuroscience and behavioral science research. You have to tell me the backstory of this, but I'm not done. Known as the CEO Whisperer for helping C-suite executives understand behavioral psychology to position themselves and their missions, this methodology that he uses is well sought after by senior executives, political leaders, as well as global entrepreneurs. His research interests lie in personal brand leadership, brand influence, as well as gender equality, which he explores extensively in his podcast, The Brain and Brand Show. This platform strategically curates content for leaders with the behavioral psychology approach, enabling them to reach their personal influence and legacy goals through neurocreativity. This must be a term that you coined.
Well, I won't say it. It's, yeah, no, I think I own it in the Southern Hemisphere.
Got it. Because this is the first time I'm encountering it. And just, some highlights. Academically, Timothy has he studied at MIT as well as Boston College. He's contributed to publications that I think you'll know, Forbes Woman, Metro FM, The Daily Maverick, amongst others. He has worked in over 40 countries, both between America, Africa, and other emerging markets. And are you a visiting lecturer or guest lecturer to Duke?
Yeah, for Duke Business School, we call them educators. Some professors like educators for the corporate market.
All right. And he also consults for the US State Department's commerce interest in Africa. So, Timothy, I think this is the most I've studied since since I did my master's, really just preparing for this conversation. And I'm so excited to get into it. So behavioral science is regarded as a study of human behavior, which seems very broad, and I hope we can narrow it down today for my listeners and viewers. And this really explores why individuals engage in specific behaviors, looking at factors such as motivation, social influences, tastes and preferences, as well as consumption habits. How does your work go about understanding, predicting, as well as influencing human behavior? As a behavioral, yeah, so behavioral scientist.
Yeah, so I'm very much interested in why we do what we do. I'm interested in the conflict that we all have between our conscious mind and our unconscious mind. So, a simple example would be if someone gave you a Louis Vuitton bag or a Makosa bag, and you carried this thing proudly for 6 months, and then your friend who gave you the bag called you back and said, "Look, I have to be honest, that's a fake."
Ooh.
So
Shots.
I'm interested in why your pleasure leaves. I'm interested in why you experience a spike in stress chemicals. I'm interested in why you would almost want to cancel this friend. I'm interested in that internal war and conflict between, at the end of the day, you had pleasure for 6 months. And when the story shifted, how that impacted your neurochemistry, your mindset. Because at the end of the day, one of my favorite stories is, and it's my favorite story not because of the impact, but because of what it says about the mind. A woman was asleep in her bed, and at midnight, uh, she was touched on the shoulder, and she began to kind of grip and hold this person, and they began to make love. And she thought it was her partner. Ooh. She orgasmed, and she hadn't orgasmed before. And when the lights came on, she discovered it wasn't her partner. I'm interested in, should the orgasm still be meaningful? And the fact when the story changed,
That is wild.
the fact that the story changed, how should that impact those 10 minutes of pleasure? And so this is a conversation at the intersection because it impacts Africa at the highest level.
Right.
So how somebody thinks about Africa will impact its luxury output, right?
Correct.
And so it's the story that's engineering emotion that I'm interested in behavioral science and applied neuroscience. It is how stories, how images, how symbolism impact a relationship with person, place, or product.
This is messing with my entire makeup right now because luxury is such an intangible concept. It's such a subjective concept. And now, when you mention the fact that the perception you have of Africa will determine your valuation, essentially, of the output that comes out of Africa, what, as behavioral scientists, are you finding is people's relationship with luxury from an African versus a global perspective?
Yeah, I'm finding that obviously you got groups of people in the world that are educated and wide open. But that's a small percentage. The vast majority of the middle class consumer that are just walking into shops all around the world are looking for the traditional Italian, European, some of the kind of Asian, French, etc.
Yeah.
But you've got this growing higher end consumer who's more knowledgeable. That's not the issue. They're gonna come find the luxury. They're not bothered by the baggage that comes with that history that's been imprinted in our mind from the negative media of Africa. They're not interested in that. The question is, how do we get this bulk middle class ignorant consumer who's stuck on educated? How do we get them educated? And how do we accelerate their education? Because that will transform the Laduma, that will transform West African, Yorubian inspired luxury to East African luxury. That would have transformed the whole continent if we can accelerate that naive middle class consumer who's stuck on old narratives.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I'm interested in. I'm fundamentally gripped with how do you take naivety by, so here's how you do it. So I like doing experiments in my talks.
Okay.
So if I have a group of 50 people, I'll send 25 of them out. Can we do an experiment on the show?
Let's do it.
Okay. So what can you write something down quickly? Type something down. Anybody watching, I want you to do the exact same thing.
Okay. Anything at all.
No, I want you to SO
Mm-hmm.
underscore P.
Okay.
So here's an experiment. I do similar type experiments in my talks. Okay? You got it?
Got it?
So have you ever been on a luxury bush experience that took a shower
Outdoors.
outdoors?
Take me there right now. Yes. Right.
You know those beautiful African luxury experience where you're out there and the water is just kind of like falling all over you.
And you can see the night sky.
Yeah.
All the morning sky.
Do you have a brand, by the way, that you enjoy like washing with?
I teeter between. Well, right now I'm on a dermalogic,
Dermatological.
that one.
Yeah.
Process, just because I feel like I'm nearing my 40s and my skin is doing some.
You look beautiful, by the way.
Thank you
Really
so
look good.
much. Thank you so much. But I typically enjoy your various brands. I go from the cheapest brand to the most expensive, actually. Like Sundays are my ritualistic days where I pamper myself, so I'll use my most expensive endures. Yeah, so your Joe Malone's, a lot of stuff on Skins, but even to the cheapest, most beautiful stuff from like Nivea. I know there's some beautiful luxurious products there.
So what word do you see? I gave you letters. What do you see?
SOP.
SO underscore P. So what word comes up?
Oh,
SO underscore P.
so
Okay. So in my research, what I did with you just now was primed you to see soap
because of you just asked me the
about everything about showering,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I could have done, and this is the key, and I want you guys to follow this closely. I could have told you, ask you about your favorite restaurant
Yeah.
and ask you about your favorite cuisine,
I could, yeah.
and you would have seen soup.
Feel you.
So I primed you to see.
So consider.
So if you want to get people to consider luxury in Africa, you've got to often engineer the priming efforts to overcome what they already, you got to drive perception. So I feel like the old school way was hoping people see, hoping people come around to it. The new school way is using algorithms, using creative campaigns to engineer a leap over people's biases
Right.
into a relationship with what you want. I cannot hope people are going to like my work. I've got to engineer it. And it's not manipulation. We're experiencing this every single day where people tell you stories and you see something. Are you followed?
I'm with you.
So all I did was tell you a story about the bush and ask you what you use, and you saw soap. And all I had to do was ask you about your favorite restaurant, and you saw soup.
Is that not deceptive though?
No, we tell the stories every day. Somebody's got to control the narrative. The Western world
Has done that as junior.
they've been telling us the story about New York. And so what happens? People go to New York and they post selfies and they become ambassadors for New York, right? And it inspires the people who live in New York. If you look at that Alicia Keys Jay-Z song,
Oh, it's a brand,
right?
It's a brand in its own.
But it's not Jay-Z and Alicia Keys that have started this. There was a clear directive. I'll give you another example. Did you know that when the two-parent household in Black America dipped below 20%, where there was a man and a woman in the house, in a nuclear home, that there was a think tank that got together to say, how can we inspire Black Americans to think about family so we can raise this? And they created the Cosby Show. Because you've got a doctor in the husband, and a lawyer in the wife.
Yeah, and like perfect 2.5 children, 2.5 children.
Yeah. And so what happened?
Yeah.
What happened? You got Barack and Michelle Obama
Beautiful brand of black family.
with the Cosby exact dynamic. So it's not an accident. You got to engineer what you want. And for me, the next major move is using behavioral science, using technology to accelerate the opportunities for African luxury.
I love that.
You can't hope for it.
I love
There's
that.
too much baggage. There's too much competition. Asia is coming after the same market.
Asia is what Asia has managed to do. Intrigues me all the time because they have managed to really reshape the narrative, even for global luxury brands that have for generations been feeding them stereotype of what luxury is. But as soon as luxury grew in the East, they infused, and this is I think the opportunity that Africa has, because they actually not negotiated, but they strong arm or they determined what they wanted luxury to be for them, including their culture. Because I find that luxury, for one, in Africa cannot be homogenous because we're so diverse. So what happens there? Do you think Africa could in fact have the same brand of luxury? Should it have the same brand of luxury? How does Western luxury, Western Africa from Southern Africa, from Eastern Africa, differ? How should they, from a behavioral perspective in their own culture and heritage, want to have a relationship with luxury?
So inherently, luxury is power. It is highly refined. It's like a laser. One of the reasons why a laser has so much power is because it's concentrated. The specifics that go into luxury, the detail that goes into luxury is concentrated. That's why you feel different. It's not just narrative, it's product, quality, and narrative. You got to have both.
And story, yeah.
And story. And so China has, I want to introduce a term that I want everybody to take very seriously. It's called soft power.
Soft power.
Yeah. So economic power is your GDP, your ability to influencing economically. What China has understood is that now that they have economic power, they need to work on their soft power. And that is exporting their luxury goods. That is exporting their restaurants. That is exporting their movies and ensuring that the world sees their culture as valued.
Got it.
That's soft power. They have an $80 billion soft power fund to do that. They're not hoping the world.
Yeah, they're not just spraying and praying.
They're not just hoping the world will want to wear their clothes, watch their movies, and speak their language.
They are ascertaining that it happens.
Yes, they are engineering it. They are going about it in a way where subtly we are being converted without realizing it. And that effort has to happen in Africa. A soft power fund needs to be developed. People like you are doing work in soft power conversion. You are inspiring us to think about Africa in a luxury context. But there needs to be big money put behind it. There needs to be funds. The Kojo Foundation, the Forest Kojo, they're also passionate about this work. He and his wife, Nicole Ari Parker, they're very, very passionate about this work. And it is time for us, for governments, private sector, to start investing in exporting luxury. And so here's why. Because what you export becomes the tool that you use to engineer perception, to create the perception of your value, the art that's exported.
Yes.
The
art world is doing a lot for this power that you're speaking about, actually, because African art right now is amongst the most valuated and bought, actually.
So soft power is the way to go. And if you look at the soft power quotient at the moment, Africa's soft power is still fairly small.
So when you speak about the quotient, when is it recorded as effective?
Yeah, so
we
so if we were to go around the world, I mean, America is still living on its soft power. As the political power is waning. The soft power is still there. People still want to watch. If they want to see Chris Brown comes and
Soft power.
Soft power.
Yeah.
Right? This is soft power. People want to watch the movies. You watch, put out Denzel, soft power.
Got it.
You get my point. And so if you look at the percentage of people that find your brand, the African brand, favorable, you can measure it. Do the research yourself. Go out there. I mean, I went into Streets of New York. It's the most popular podcast I ever had. It was #1 in South Africa. I asked a simple question to well over 100 people, and I edited it to an episode. I'll send it to you. I said, when I say South Africa, what comes to mind?
What was the
The bigger question is, what did South Africa want to come to mind?
so that's the engineering part.
Yes.
That's okay.
You got to say to yourself, what do I want people to be thinking about?
People when I say I'm a piano right now. If it was today you were asking the question.
Yeah, so when I asked people, it was all over the place. I had a couple from the UK who got into an argument on the mic. He says, I think of sharks because he's obsessed with watching some shark show.
Okay.
No, some not sharks. It was about something that had to do with surfing. He was obsessed with surfing. So
She said,
she said crime.
oh, that.
And he's like, what crime? What are you talking about? Two
But
white
it's
people.
the brand.
It's that somebody had positioned crime to her, and somebody had positioned
the wildlife.
the nature to him. And so that's what we experienced. That's what I experienced. I experienced that it was all over the place.
But what was more prominent?
There was nothing.
Nothing.
And that shocked, and that's why the episode did so well. Because it shows that South Africa hadn't did a good enough job of engineering a story.
Right.
Whereas if you look at New York, the people driving the brand New York,
Yeah.
it's where dreams are made.
Yeah.
And it's clear.
Yeah.
There's songs written about it. I don't
There are
understand.
movies that like show it.
Like, who's driving the luxury mission for Soweto? Soweto has history that is extraordinary. Where are the artists that just put out songs that are about why are we not wearing the Soweto hats and gear and so forth? Why are we not pushing that at a concerted? I know some people are, but why are we not making an effort?
There's no compounded effort being made.
Yeah, there's no think tank behind it. There is no institute behind it, and there's no funding behind it to front the artists. The artists are on their own. And shout out to all the artists that are out there doing it on your own without the $80 billion Chinese fund behind you, because they still breaking through. There's still, you look at some of the artists like Nelson, Makam, breaking through, but they're on their own almost. The system doesn't support them.
And actually, they are pushing against the system because a lot of artists are deciding to go independent.
Yes.
Because again, I don't know whether it's gallerists or it's curators. I'm not sure what's happening. And I know one of the galleries that do compelling work in putting out African art is the Melrose Gallery, because they focus on Pan-African art.
Yeah.
You know, they're the home of Mama Esther Mahlangu. And they honor retrospective to around the world right now, putting that brand out. And I think what that will do for the brand South Africa is hopefully it does draw an association between South Africa and the art, and some positive perception of beautiful things. Tell me, how do humans go about making decisions, and how is this applied in the real world? And I think you've spoken a little bit about this. And let's maybe make it more practical. So if I purchase decisions around luxury, what is driving the psyche that I should aspire to queue outside the LB store at the Diamond Walk? Because I do think that it's something that creates a FOMO, and something that people work the whole year to say, I want that orange paper bag. What is driving that in people that, in this geography, people coming from all over the continent to buy those products, whether you're buying them in Dubai, South Africa, anyway. What is that aspiration that is sort of driving that? Is it a hunger? Is it a background of scarcity? Is it a desire to fit in? What would you say from a behavioral science?
Yeah, I mean, you've got different demographics, right? You've got the demographic that's new money. Yeah, the nouveau rich types. But then you also have the types that, like me, I've had these sneakers probably 4 years.
A good purchase.
Yeah. And I bought them because the brand Louis Vuitton is known for travel. and they're known for being able to withstand the demands of travel.
A bit of background, they are a luggage wave. They started off as a luggage wave. People don't know that. They started off as started by a porter, actually.
So the ability to withstand my travel demands is why and in fact, there was another version like this that had the LV stamp all over the shoe, and I rejected those.
Yeah.
So my point is that you've got people who want the rigor from the brand, and you got the warm people who want the symbolism of the brand. And I think that both sides, the rigor and the symbolism, when they come together, they create magic. And so I would say to any person who's even thinking about, if you have the disposable income, I'm very practical. I have on an H&M suit, but I have it well tailored, so you would know it's an H&M suit. Are you following me? And so I'm the type of person that, on the one side, I need certain things that's going to be able to withstand
The durability
the
of your body.
durability, and there's certain things that need to be more practical. And so
Because you wear suits all the time.
Yes.
So to be buying
a LV suit just to wear in the rain on a chaotic schedule day where I'm in and out doesn't really make sense. And so I would say to any individual who's thinking about how to integrate luxury into my life, think about what purpose it could serve, because certain luxury goods can be passed on.
right.
It can have intergenerational value. And so if and then there's certain people who feel like they need that symbolic ability to signal to their colleagues.
I was gonna ask you about signaling, so it's crazy that you're in minority.
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. So signaling plays a role in everything. Our body signals. When you are ovulating, did you know you signal?
Yeah.
Yeah, you signal. Your skin becomes rosier, lips become fuller. Men, when we have more testosterone in us, our chest comes out a bit more. Our muscles pop and vibrate more. So as humans, we're wired to signal biologically. And so signaling with goods and with clothes and with the watch is natural.
Is that a signal of social status, signal of I want to fit in, signal of wealth, or it doesn't matter really, but you're signaling? And I suppose then is this the deliberate mindset that goes behind the luxury purchase? Also because you're investing so much.
Let me just say this, because signaling is something that I've studied, that we signal with everything. If you're running late, you signal by sending a message saying, I'm running a few minutes late because of 1, 2, 3, you're signaling that I still have integrity.
Right.
If you are in a relationship and that relationship is not really going well, and you decide I'm going to make it up by sending my partner flowers, I'm going to do this, you're signaling
I still have an intention to be here.
that I potentially be. So we signal with everything. So I don't care who you are. Whether you think you're not a signaler, it's impossible because your body is signaling. That's number one. The question is, how do I become intentional about signaling my personal brand value? And that's where, for me, the African luxury conversation comes in. You've got to be intentional about signaling to the world. Brands build themselves by putting out something that I can relate to. And so if we want the world to be interested in African luxury, you got to signal with intention. You got to have people that are investing in the signal.
Yeah.
Who's backing the signaling, right? And signal with the level of authority and confidence that I deserve to be able to signal.
And actually, by virtue of this is how this podcast was born, because we want to signal to the world that, first of all, we have a story to tell and it's compelling. And secondly, it's really a rebuttal to say, yes, we embrace Western luxury, but we want to embrace it alongside our own value of ourselves, which a previous guest I interviewed say we have always been luxurious as Africans because we lived our lives in a considered way. Our great-grandparents lived our lives in a very considered manner. We've always been sustainable. So this concept that's being sold back to us of sustainability is actually, we've always found, we've always given back to the earth. We've understand the symbiotic relationship between ourselves and nature. And I think this is where Africa possesses its power. But how do we then potentially signal differently? Is it because so much has been taken away from us as a geography that we now fail to see the value in ourselves? I think there's pockets of the continent that does it well. You mentioned Rwanda, you mentioned Ghana. They're doing well in terms of music. Nigeria is doing well in terms of film. But how do we start to rebut or to shift that perception in terms of the global perception of Africa
If you look at the
as Africans?
yeah, yeah. If you look at the 1.23, some people say 1.4 billion people in Africa. As the middle class rises, the demand for luxury increases. Some of it is natural. Some of it happens organically. As that middle class,
It's the pattern of growth.
it's the pattern of growth. It's like one of my favorite things about universities. If you live near a university, you're always going to find quality food because the professors demand it. Yeah, every college town has beautiful little treasures. Even if you go towards UJ and Wits, if you go to Lagos Business, Bromfontein, if you go to Boston,
I was gonna, yeah.
Harvard and MIT demand some of the best restaurants, some of the best food. And UCT, the same thing in Cape Town. And I will say to anybody is that as we're patient, as the middle class is rising, I remember when I first came to South Africa, there were only like 2.5 million Black people in the middle class. Now it's over 10 million. So that's why you see the Ladumas starting to rise with that middle class. And I think on the one side, it's about measuring that growth and documenting it like you're doing. And on the other side is applying political pressure for investment. That's where your strategy can really come in. By documenting these conversations and these stories, you can then get behind a lot of the funding of the arts and culture and private funding, starting up, get private equity behind it and say, look, if we go about this organic, we will have probably 10 Ladumas, but if we accelerate it as the middle classes grow,
We'll see 100.
exactly. But so nope, I don't think we're making that connection.
Okay.
Are you following me?
Yeah.
So the ability to lobby pressure is very, very necessary. And it's voices like yourself who are studied this, who are serious about this work, that has to be the ones driving it. Can't just be random people talking. Because we always have these chats at the Bri or our friends' houses. No, but there needs to be somebody dedicated, an institute of luxury that's driving this thing.
Stop reading my notes.
Okay, sorry.
And actually, Kami's laughing outside because these are the very conversations that we're having in our office right now around. So we have Noble, which is our luxury consulting business, and it's a consulting business for African luxury. And we partner and we work with brands and we work with personal brands and corporate brands who are doing work that are just not joining the dots. So the Institute of Luxury is obviously really just, how do we raise the vibration to begin to aggregate what the standard of, first of all, what is African luxury as a definition? And what is the standard that we set to say this can stand in good state against the world's sort of luxury? We are also, I suppose, what differs with us as a continent is we're very communal, we're collective society. So what influences, the behavior at an individual versus at a community level? Because I know that there's certain parts where you can't, it's almost frowned upon if you're going to go home with the most expensive car. I know there's a whole there's a whole December culture around, I've got that pressure to buy a new car when I go home to show that I've worked. I've got that pressure to have the iPhone or the latest iPhone and that sort of thing. But given our collectivist values, because not all the societies are emerging to middle and therefore upper, there's just certain individuals in certain homes that are doing this thing. Well, how do we balance that scale? Because I think there's still a guilt to it. I know I'm very mindful if I'm going to go home with certain things that I pack or car I show up in, just because it is distasteful and it's garish.
One of the things that I am gripped with at the moment, interest and research, is luxury and consciousness. So I'll give you an example. There are luxurious ideas. There's elegant thoughts. There's elegant poetry. There's elegant eye contact. There's elegant ways to make love. I am interested in the depth of engagement as human beings. And for any human being that wants to make a statement to their family, start there first. Because then the material output of that will follow. So, for example, if you go home and you see that there's a couple of kids that need mentoring and you start up a program, if your family member, some mom or somebody needs a home, and you build a home and it's detailed and it's stunning, it represents your family legacy and bloodline. And then from there, the other material things come, right? If you sort out the elegance in your mind first, the materialism mirrors it. It comes afterwards. There's an emptiness if you don't sort out the elegant. That's the key. I find, for example, every single relationship, I'm looking to be authentically elegant and luxurious in my engagement by fully being present in this conversation and making sure that I don't have an agenda. I'm genuinely paying attention. I feel like people feel that.
I connect with that because, there's always just been something that authentic. I think it's the authenticity really. Being conscious about who I am in a space, my impact on the space. And so I can see how leading with the materialism is almost divorces you from really the higher level or the higher vibration of the elegant,
Yeah.
the luxurious.
Yes, that's exactly it. You nailed it. Because you feel vulnerable unnecessarily. You don't feel there's a foundation.
Yeah, now you gotta act up. Now
You gotta act. Yeah.
to signal the.
And that's not sustainable, man. Like the most luxurious brands have been around for how long?
Yeah.
Fly by nights, that's not luxury. Luxury is enduring. Luxury stands the test of time. Your work in this space will be around long after you're gone. If it's
It must transcend
it should try
you.
Yes.
And so do good brands actually. So from a luxury perspective, behavioral science informs people's motivations behind purchasing luxury goods, and brands leverage the certain psychological triggers, which you've mentioned around the signaling, to effectively market and sell their products. How do luxury brands apply the behavioral science to drive more and more consumption? Because there's something about scarcity. There's something about producing small volumes. There's something which informs the price, which informs not availing the product so much that it's everywhere. You know what I mean? So how do luxury brands apply behavioral science in terms of driving the purchase decisions or consumption?
The first thing is I always create an archetype for everyone I am trying to engage. So if I'm writing for a publication, I create the ideal person I'm writing for. I understand their challenges. I understand what microaggressions they're facing. I try to understand what keeps them up at night. Why do they cry? Why are they emotional? And then I write for them. And my explicit goal is to help usher them, can partner with them through their storms, through their challenges. And when I do that, it lands well. If I don't, and I just put out,
There's a greater connection.
yeah. If you like the simplest brand, one of my favorite brands is Nike, and it's because it in different chapters in Nike's history. If you go watch their documentaries, they started by being a brand for Olympians. And when they discovered they can help the ordinary person who's sitting on the couch who feels like I can't do anything.
Like sort of embody that energy, that is superpower.
Like, let's make it super simple. So Nike is sitting there going, I got a person on the couch and I got an Olympian. There's a journey. I may not get to be an Olympian, but if I can go in that direction and I can feel there's an Olympian in me, then my goal is for Nike's goal is to help you just do it.
Right.
Right. So if you
Look at those iconic brands.
right, if you look at any luxury brand, what am I helping you become? What am I helping you achieve? What am I helping you overcome? What am I helping you solve? And if you start to answer those questions, and if I put on a laduma, I'm helping you identify as an African at an elite level. I'm
Never looked at it that
right. I'm helping you become more of your core. I'm helping you connect to your tribal,
The spirited,
the spirited, vibrant self. So if I can tell you now that the next generation of African luxury is going to help people walk into boardrooms anywhere in the world figure out how to translate that. I don't necessarily think there are many brands that are doing that well now. Most African luxury are almost kind of separating and saying we want you to show up in kind of a celebration, like wedding.
Yeah, so you're only reserved for the traditional
Yes,
ceremonies, but
yes.
actually, I'm as powerful as the Burberry.
Yes,
It's like a trench,
exactly.
you know what I mean?
The Berber trench, for example, it's a staple. Why? Because it doesn't get in the way when it signals.
Right.
It signals in a way that is subtle but powerful. And I think the next generation of African luxury is going to help us do that. And I feel like there's a moment. Do you know where pinstripes come from?
No.
So pinstripes come from the British when the industrial age was forming. They wanted to create an elite working class. And their whole thing, well, they put together a think tank, academics, designers, entrepreneurs, etc. And they said, this is the brief. We want people to think between the lines. We want people to
Oh my
mirror,
God.
mirror and echo the discipline of the accounting ledger when they're working. And they gave this brief to the fabric weavers and it came back with pinstripes.
That's so interesting.
Mirroring and echo the discipline of the accounting ledger. It's that level of focus. Like, what exactly do you want the person wearing your garment to achieve? Do you want them to be singularly focused on a task? Or do you want them to be glowing in celebration?
Yeah. And actually, it's so interesting that you say that. And this is what we love about these conversations because we learn so much. But what you were saying about how a Burberry trench is a staple that doesn't upset the setting, I also just feel that Africans are now so bold and we want to be bold walking into settings. And therefore, I'm not going to apologize for having my vibrant Makossa patterns. Whereas before, you kind of had to be in a navy or a gray or a brown and a white shirt, very pristine, like status quo vibe. So I actually love the fact that Africans have found their voice and have found their identity in the world to know that you can walk in with a beautiful Makossa garment. And actually, the beauty about the Makossa work, and we're belaboring this point, but there's so much about this conversation in behavioral science there because it, for a society like ours, South Africa having how many different parts of the country, different tribes, it's not just Xhosa people that wear Makossa. So he's really been able to transcend, something that the tribalist perception and sort of mentality.
So let me just say this real quick. You know why I loved Ushaka Ulembe?
Oh, beautiful.
It was, what I love about it, Nomzamo was a friend of mine, and I remember watching it thinking, her body was luxurious, the skin tone, beautiful. The characters they chose, the costumes were pure luxury. It's I've encouraged every single person I could think of in the West to watch this because it was one of the first times where I've seen where there was intentionality around ensuring that the cultural artifacts, imagery,
The
how they
representation
spoke.
was at the height of luxury.
Yes, everything. I mean, if you look at even how little things like how they showed the nudity, it wasn't even in the way. It didn't overwhelm.
It was just a
It was
beautiful.
beautifully
Yeah.
done. And I feel like we're in this extraordinary moment in history where if the lobbyists, if the investors, if the designers come together.
I think enough of us are having the same conversation in silos, actually. Yeah. And I completely agree with you about, because I watched the earlier Shaga, and watching this one, I was just like, let's just capture this and sell it to the world in terms of representing really the height of what African luxury can become, because it was just beautiful. So the collective values of Ubuntu in Africa, Waike embraces this philosophy that speaks of a continent's humility and sort of common code for cohesion. In your view, is luxury fundamentally aligned or misaligned to African values?
I think that it's at the highest level of African values. I mean, in Japan, there's no word for I. The word translates to I'm a portion of you. You cannot create luxury on your own. You got to do it through others. And so the point is that the reason why African cultures have stood the test of time through so much extraordinary pressure and war and colonialism is because the cultures are so strong. Did you know that there was a missionary who wrote a whole book, basically an apology for how they underestimated African culture in their approach? And there's a book by Dudley Kidd, who was commissioned, he's an anthropologist that was commissioned to study what was happening in the crawl. And he wrote a whole book that basically was designed to give back to the British colonists for them to figure out a way to sustain colonialism. This is a book written in the 1800s. And in that book, his entire message to them was, you won't be able to sustain colonialism because the cultures are too strong. And there is a luxury.
Too strong in who they are?
Yeah, African culture. The idea you had this intergenerational blood transfer. Like you've got parents, then you got elders, then you got chiefs, you got ancestors. And they say it's too strong. It's not about the individual. Like the bloodline dynamics are too resilient. You won't be able to sustain.
Oh my
You,
God.
yeah,
That's so beautiful.
that was his whole thing. His whole thing back to them in 1800s is that it will never last.
And true to form.
And it came crashing down when it was almost an embarrassment to the West to even think it was going to sustain itself.
I think even now there's a it's not even brewing anymore. It's quite vivid in terms of, because I also think that the ancestry comes to demand what not it failed, but what it couldn't achieve. So the ancestry is coming now to demand that in current generations. And I think that that's what's informing this awakening of Africans wanting to be more bolder in terms of themselves in the world. And given our collectivist society, is the room for the exclusivity and sort of self-image enhancement that's driven by luxury?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back, you look at so I came to this continent because of a woman I met in the States who was half Swati, half the other part of her family was from the Eastern Cape.
Was it romantic?
Yes.
Thank you. Shout out to
The Swazis, a big part of my heart is in Swaziland and in South Africa.
What a beautiful part of the continent.
Yeah. And if you look at any traditional ceremony, you look at the detail and how they separate, for example, if you're from this region, the country, versus if you're royalty, versus if
the distinction in
the distinction has always been
and
there.
the customs.
Yeah, the distinction is always there. So it's not I understand that sometimes people feel like if they raise their head outside of their culture or their tribe, they're going to be knocked back down because we're part of a collectivist society. But distinction and uniqueness for individuality, there's always been opportunity for that. And you cannot escape it because every single person's fingerprint is different. You get my point? Like every person's singular experience is different, and that is often rewarded. And you see it play out in every culture across this continent, that certain individuals, based on their genetic strength, their educational background, that's why if every person was supposed to be the same, you wouldn't even do an assessment for Lobola. Everybody would just pay the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Lobola has an assessment process, an audit.
Yeah.
Right?
to put it academically.
Yeah, there's an audit. There's like, okay, then the uncles come and all that sort of stuff. But the point is, individuality has always thrived within the collective. There is room for that.
Yeah, okay. We should fully embrace it.
Yes.
We should fully embrace it. Africa is leading this renaissance of luxury, I think, with the celebration of heritage and the diversity. It means then we are in deficit of African brands that fully represent all of us. So, I mean, you're speaking about like there's Sishreshwe, there's beautiful, cowhides that form beautiful garments that are made. How, therefore, can global luxury brands or even our luxury brands that are aspiring or emerging craft narratives around their products that resonate more with us at an emotional level?
Yeah, it's every single, I believe that symbols regulate the seat of our soul.
Okay.
And so when you start to think about what moves us at our core, if you see a Jewish person wearing a kippah, or somebody from an Islamic background wearing their garb, hijab, or you see a Christian wearing a cross, understanding the history of those symbols and putting those forward to such an extent that the individual feels a connection. And here's why. Let me just explain from behavioral science purpose why symbols matter, and why, whether it's an African, a cow's hide or a beading, why that matters and why it's important to put those stories forward. Because the unconscious mind has this kind of primitive, instinctual wildness. And oftentimes you need a symbol to tame it. And so there's this sense at times that the unconscious mind, and we can all admit, everybody watching this can admit, we thought thoughts and wanted to do things we know we shouldn't be doing. But sometimes just looking at a symbol will remind us of who we are. And that's exactly, you're trying to put for a cowhide as part of your symbolism or like these brands called imprint, or, any of these brands, if you're putting forth these symbols, then you need to tell the story to support them so that people can connect to those stories in their spiritual realm.
Okay.
And it's in that, so then the symbol helps tame us. African symbols can help tame parts of us that are untamable at times. There are parts of us that are so raw at times, and there are parts of us that are wild. Every human being, from the beginning of time, from the Bible to every human being will admit, if they look in the mirror, there are parts of them that needs to be tamed. And African luxury can be one of the highest tamer of that, because we put it on. You ever notice when you put on luxury, you become and you challenge yourself.
There's a point that
You bring yourself.
Yeah.
That wild side is you bundle that wild side up and you lock it in so that you can go out there and you can represent the best of yourself in a channeled, disciplined manner. Because luxury at its core is disciplined.
It's a refiner then.
It's refined, it's discipline.
Yeah, because even when, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners, whatever your traditional garment is, there's something about wearing it that just invokes something else.
Yeah,
that is
you walk different.
Yeah.
What do you put on? You look at Indian women when they put on the sari.
Sorry.
You take that sari off and just things go a little bit crazy, right? You take, and that's the beauty. We've got that wild side. We've got the other side.
We're all of it.
And we're all of it. And luxury
All of it.
can channel that other side.
Let's get into an interesting part, something more contemporary in terms of that's probably shaping behavioral science as a study that dates so far back. So we interchangeably occupy the role of influencing and being influenced by others because consumers typically benchmark themselves against informational reference groups, which give them a sense of identity and belonging. Today, many luxury brands pay celebrity ambassadors or influencers to market their products on social media with the intention to drive purchase consideration in whichever part of the consumer journey or consumption journey it may be. Do you regard the work of influencers as effective in driving consumer behavior?
Oh yeah, I mean, one of my favorite stories is uh, this actor who was so wild, and he was wearing a jeans brand. The jeans brand paid him not to wear the clothes anymore.
Oh my.
Yeah, and I think some
Because it's not the perception they wanted.
yes,
Okay.
and he was influencing it too much, and that's all he wore on the show. He was on a reality show. That's all he wore. They paid him not to, and that was very strategic. They're very smart. Influencers, especially disciplined influencers. I mean, you see that with as the Kardashians became more disciplined, the Skim brand started to skyrocket. You know, when they became known as businesswomen, they were at Forbes.
Yeah.
Then the Skims brand started to, you get my point. So as the individual influencer becomes more disciplined, you know, you look at, for example, local brands. I wouldn't say that Zinc these is Italy has a luxury branded era, but it could go in that direction because the older she gets, the more she's now married, children, she becomes more refined. The music evolves. She could get to that level where she could take an era, create a luxury version of it, because her audience is growing and maturing. She may always have the
Because it is an aspiration.
yeah. She could keep the entry level, you know, for the young and upcoming, but she could also create that more mature version as she evolves. But the point is, she as an influencer has evolved and grown. She was very kind of all over the place.
Yeah, she's refined her brand.
She's refined her brand because she's gone through the fire. So she's had to refine it. She's become a mother. She's become an entrepreneur. She's taken the knocks. She's had heartache and pain. But this is my point, that the more disciplined the influence is, the more effective they can be. And now we talk about luxury, right? So I'm talking about brands that associate themselves with disciplined influences have an opportunity. Luxury brands that associate themselves with random influencers who are not disciplined, you could destroy your brand quite quick.
I see that. And I mean, now in the age of virtual communities, the work that's happening in behavioral science right now as it pertains to luxury, I mean, how has it adapted to the patterns that we see emerging just from social media and the digital world and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, in Stanford, they have a lab that everybody's trying to get into. Out of that lab came the founders of like Instagram and so forth. It's a behavioral science. You know, what they're discovering is that primitive
A research lab.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, and they have a program, a behavioral science program, where they're studying how to get people locked onto social media.
Wow. Oh my.
Like
More so now.
yes,
Even more than now.
because brands want to return. And if you're on and off and I can't get you glued to my product, then it's going to be hard to measure the return.
ROI, yeah.
Right? And so they have a concept called you put hot triggers in the path of motivated people. Okay? So you take a person who is motivated to want to be more, who is motivated to signal to the world that I've arrived.
Tie into the aspiration, really.
Yes.
And the motivation.
So in behavioral science, the question is, what is the hot trigger? The trigger becomes hotter if it aligns with somebody's highest values. And so if you've got somebody scrolling online who is a person that's trying to achieve something, and you show them at their highest values that I can help you achieve that solves this new algorithmic power. That if I see that, I stop all the scrolling and go poof, and I dive in.
Yeah.
So one of the things they discovered is that because we, at our deepest core, married people, single people, we're always trying to find our self-worth through social media. Am I as attractive? Would my partner like this person more? That's why women are so competitive.
Oh my.
If you go to a women's event, women are competing unconsciously to go, if that woman is hotter, she's a potential threat.
Okay.
That's why you got to scan each
I
other.
better come correct.
One of my favorite things to do is if I'm invited to a women's event, watching women like stealthily scan each other to go, is this woman a threat? Is this competition? Can this be my homie? Should I network with this person? Watching this thing play out.
Like, I like her, but I don't want her so close.
Exactly. All of that stuff.
I don't know.
Deep.
Constant bargain.
And so what happens is the algorithms have discovered if you show what we call the perfect hip to waist ratio, hip
To waste.
to waist ratio,
Okay. Body type.
it stops people in their tracks. Stops women and it stops men. Why? Because it's seen as the ultimate form of fertility. And our strongest instinct as human beings is to know where do we fit in the fertility hierarchy. Am I the baddest in the room? Or will I be overridden by somebody who's badder? And so if you are a brand and you understand that everybody is competing, and if you can help give people an arsenal to compete,
To stand out.
to stand out, to be on the front line and be the best, it's really, really powerful.
This is why music is so powerful, because it gives us the language to then, pitch
But this is,
all these subconscious things that they don't know we're doing.
this is where these words come from. She's a baddie.
Yeah, like, yes,
It's that simple.
you're the best.
Exactly.
This is why Chris Brown. Don't come for me. We're still just coming down from the breezy high. And because luxury is so intentional, is it authentic then how people in social communities and by virtual communities, social media, are subscribing to consumption choices? I mean, I may not have wanted that bag, but now I see it posted and now I have a desire for it. I suppose they are obviously trying to sell more products and services to us. But is it authentic, and how do we make the distinction? Because I find that more, and you mentioned this earlier, more mature consumers of luxury can distinguish what they want for themselves and what they even need, because it moves from a want to a need. You bought a very practical pair of shoes because it was a need for your lifestyle. But more sort of emerging consumers of luxury are purely driven by wants they didn't even know they wanted. So what is that tension point, and sort of how do we get it? Yeah, how do we not become slaves to this digital algorithmic society?
Let me just be blunt. And maybe this is a good way for us to close
Yeah.
this conversation. Let's look at your teenage years. I'm going to bring this back to fertility. This is going to seem wild and crazy mistakes. So the reason why a 10-year-old is not wearing and conscious and cares about luxury is because they're not fertile. Luxury only really starts to matter when your fertility kicks in. When it's time to signal my value. A 5-year-old ain't signaling nothing. It's when you're in your fertility peak. You start to get into your teens and late teens, and you start to hit the market, both as a potential mate, as an employee. A 90-year-old not really interested in luxury either. They're done. They're no longer fertile. It's about legacy at that stage. Okay, so it's in your fertility window where it becomes brutal that you sit for survival. And if I'm not on top of my game, I could lose partners. The stakes are quite high. And so when you first enter and you're in your late teens, early 20s, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to spend money. It's your first time. Get your first bonus. You're likely to
blow it.
You're going to make mistakes. I've made them myself. I almost went into bankruptcy. We are at that age, you're solving for voids. When I was a teenager, I couldn't wear the Jordans that everybody else was wearing on my basketball team because my parents couldn't afford them. So the moment I got money, what's going to happen?
That you're on them Jordans.
I'm on the Jordan. And so you're going to make a lot of mistakes in your early 20s. Credit card debt is going to skyrocket. What I could say to anyone, Some of this is personality driven. There are certain personalities that are more inclined, extroverted types are much more inclined to want to signal more intensely, more likely to go out and buy luxury, etc. And introverted, severely introverted people who want to be seen but don't know how, are more likely to go and buy luxury. And so, one of the things you've got to say to yourself in those early days is that if I give up the purpose of my life and the desire for me to want to be more in my mind and my soul, I can start to offset a little bit those desires to get trapped in those communities where they're selling you luxury goods. But we still are gonna fail a lot and make those mistakes and try to bounce back quicker. Spend that money, make the mistake, and going like it's taking these international trips. Dubai is too expensive, guys. First of all, Dubai, Tokyo, New York, London. If you're gonna go there and you're going there rand or most African currencies, you're gonna come back broke and miserable. Oh no! And was it really worth it? So my point is, let those mistakes bounce back quickly, because you start to see when you get in your 40s and 50s, if you've matured, that stuff means a lot less. But in the fiery period of your early 20s, you get caught up on social media. I need to signal this. I gotta do this. I can go there. I'm gonna get more likes. I understand it. Embrace it, but learn quickly from it.
Well, thank you very much. We always ask this question, and this has been a really opening conversation and eye-opening conversation, and probably what we intended for it to be. What is your ultimate luxury?
Yo, I have, I have. This is like the simplest question I've had to answer in a long time. It's peace of mind. It's my ultimate luxury. As a writer, that's my core thing. I write and think, and a peaceful space to be able to write and think, whether I'm on a beach, whether I'm in the Bahamas, whether I'm in a garden. That is my ultimate luxury, is to reduce the noise so I can be able to think.
I love that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I always love how when we ask that question, people have a sense of just closing their eyes and actually going to that place. I saw you do that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Timothy. This has been so enlightening, and I think so many conversations for us to continue having. So thank you for accepting this invite.
You are absolutely amazing. Thank you.
We appreciate it. It's a wrap. Thank you.